Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar on Devata Upasana. Today is a very auspicious day of Basant Panchami, and it is also nearly a year since we registered our organization. This year has been phenomenal in what we have managed to achieve, thanks to the blessings of Bhairava and Maa Tara. We have completed more than 15 crores of counts of Bhairav Japa collectively for Dharma Raksha, as well as 4 or 5 in person retreats. We have also been doing special offerings and pujas at some very powerful kshetras, including Bhairava Temple in Kashi, Ujjain, Guruvayur, Palani, Madurai Meenakshi Temple, Nepal Mahakal Temple, Maa Kamakhya Temple, Maa Tara Temple, Guhyeshwari, and Kashi Batuk Bhairava Temple. In addition, we also do Annadanams at more than 10 Ved Pathshalas monthly, and more than 30,000 needy people have been fed through our monthly Annadanam initiative. We also provide medicinal expenses for dog NGOs and support Gaushalas that have also been provided in this time. We feel extremely blessed that we have been given a chance to do so many sevas thanks to the blessings of our deities. With that, let me welcome Sri Rajarshi Nandy ji, who will speak to you today on the topic of Devata Upasana. And towards the end, we will take up some selected questions from the audience as well. So, welcome, Rajarshi ji.
Namaste to everybody. Jai Maa Tara, Jai Bhairava, Jai Maa Kamakhya. Today is indeed a very auspicious day because of Vasant Panchami, and also because we were able to, as Neha pointed out, we were able to register our trust last year on this specific day with the aim of gathering people and doing certain kinds of exercises, sevas to the deities, which will help in the coming times for activities related to Dharma. So these sevas that we provide from KBUF through our voluntary contributions per month, every month, is basically with the sankalpa that there is an upsurge of Sanatana Dharma. There's a protection of people who follow Sanatana Dharma. Whereas if there are threats, whether it's internal or external, by the blessings of the deities, let those be neutralized, let our karmas turn positive so that eventually this land, which is truly destined in its own in traditional sense from the time of its inception, that this remains the primary place where Dharma manifests, not only for the people here, but for the whole world eventually. Vasant Panchami is also, as many of you might be aware, and especially people who have followed my interviews and podcasts. Vasant Panchami is ideally the day we worship Goddess Saraswati. And there is a specific form of Saraswati which is worshipped in the tantric manner, which is linked to Maa Tara. We call her Neela Saraswati, the blue Saraswati. That's term, when we use the term blue, it specifically signifies a deeper kind of knowledge that has an actualizing power. So we enter into the realm of what we call as Vigyaana, which is higher than the normal knowledge. Normal Jnana is what you attain through practice and inspiration and various things. Vijnana is a stage of knowledge that starts where the rational mind comes to an end, where the intuitive mind in an individual works, and it has a power of actualization which is very rare, which is the mark of a great, which is sort of the aim which all upasana will eventually lead an individual to. And the divine force, the deity, the form of the divine mother who governs that realm is known as Neela Saraswati. When she blesses somebody, then there is a spontaneous awakening of uh, knowledge and wisdom that comes into the mind, human mind. Whether the person is well read or not does not matter. It comes in a very peculiar manner, and that knowledge is so perfect, so powerful, that it has an impact in the world outside for a very long time to come. This is her very unique and most powerful blessing that is associated with Maa Tara, and which very humbly we like to believe that there is some inspiration of Bhagavati Tara and Kamakhya in all the activities that we do and the activities that we plan to do in coming times. Devata Upasana is the fundamental fuel on which dharma works. most important thing about Sanatana Dharma is the worship of deities. Every rule that has been made till now, every niyama, every paddhati, every method of sadhana is but a way of connecting to the world of the gods. How do we understand what they like, how to worship them, what to offer to them, how to take that worship to a higher level. This whole thing, this whole technology, this whole ritual, this whole process is the crux of dharma. So long every other rule that has been made in dharma, whether the rules related to the varnashram, whether everything else was made in order that this specific core, the heart of dharma, the worship of deities, remains intact, and that there are people who are able to attain to the highest state of communion with the deity. It has happened in thousands of years ago, it happens today, and it will happen in future. And this is precisely why dharma is called sanatana. It is eternal because it can be replicated by every generation. It is not a thing that only somebody in the past has done it and nobody else can do it. No, there will be certain changes based on desh kal patra, but even then, the crux of the whole method of sadhana, the crux of the whole uh, system of upasana remains intact, so that it offers us the benefits of attaining to a state where we are closer to the deities we worship. So that itself is the fundamental reason, fundamental point why we do sadhana. Uh, and the question comes that why should we do sadhana? Because it helps the individual to transform oneself, transform from the human condition, which has its various flaws, weaknesses, sufferings, etc., and then go into a state where uh, he or she is able to alter oneself to become a reflection of the divine. This is very important to understand, that only in our religion we have, in dharma we have the method by which, at least the roadmap, I'm not saying everybody will be able to do it on day one, but at least the roadmap by which an individual can transform himself into the reflection of a deity, into a reflection of a god. That is a form of mukti, liberation. We have had instances of great upasakas, masters, siddhas, mahapurushas who have done that. And in future also there will be people who will do that, because that is what fuels dharma. That is the core base of dharma. As long as that keeps happening, there is nothing, no force anywhere which will be able to completely eradicate, or we may pass to bad times and we may pass to good times, uh, but we will always survive. And not only survive, in the coming times, this becomes even more important, because from this year onwards, for a period of few years, there is going to be some degree of turmoil in terms, even the grahas and the jyotish reflects that. But this phase of turmoil is like a passing from one state to another. Whenever there is a passing, whatever state, that period of sandhi, when it's neither light nor dark, when it's neither from being alive to the next stage, when somebody, or, when there's a death is also like a transition. Whenever there's a transition phase, there is some chaotic forces that come into play. It's the nature of the world, how it is. So we may pass through such kind of phases in the next 2 3 years. In this sense, it is absolutely important for individuals to have a steady, solid practice of a deity, preferably some of the deities who are more fierce, the Ugra Devatas, little bit of sadhana of the Ugra Devatas, which are capable of being performed even for a householder in their home, will help you gain that kind of inner strength and stamina, so that you pass off this phase easily. And also that helps eventually to maintain the balance of dharma and bring this whole nation, this whole country, and this whole people up into a much higher state. So this itself is a very, very good reason why somebody should engage in Devata Upasana at this specific juncture in time. So keeping this in mind, we have this various Vishesh sadhanas that we do. While one of the primary sadhanas that the Kamakhya Bhairava Upasaka Foundation and the people associated with it are doing is related to the simple Nama Japa of Lord Bhairava, who is a fierce form of Shiva. Along with it, in the month, there are sadhanas related to Maa Tara, Durga, Skanda. So all these are somewhere deities who are a little bit fierce, but also who are extremely important in the coming times for the uplift and upsurge of dharma that is required. Uh, From the spiritual perspective, for an upasaka, and this also I've mentioned earlier too, a sadhana actually bears fruit when you have done it for at least minimum of 3 to 4 years unbroken. But that's just the beginning stage. And then it goes up to at least 10 to 12 years unbroken. Because the deity that you're trying to approach is very vast and very subtle. They have been there from the time that, even perhaps the beginning of creation. And if tomorrow, by some fluke, um, humans stop existing on earth, the deities will still exist. So you can imagine that they're truly infinite and internal from the perspective, from the limited human perspective that we have. So our human life is what, 60, 70, 80 years, which is just a blip in the eye for a deity. So in order to be able to succeed into transform oneself into a stage where you have a very solid connection with the deity, very solid connection, such a solid connection that transforms you eventually from the human condition to a higher state. It requires that there has to be a consistent discipline, patient practice that should go on for 10 to 12 years. And in this 10 to 12 years is basically, one looks at it as a testing phase. The deity sees what kind of commitment you have to the sadhana. In this phase, obviously, there will be times when somebody will, you will have a positive experience. Some days there will be negative experiences in life because the grahas are anyway working based on the individual's karmas. Because anything good or bad that you experience is specifically for the purpose of things, is like a, what do you call it? Something that comes back to you for things that you have done. That is the first principle of nature, first principle of Jyotisha, first principle of anything. So, keeping that in mind, this phase of 3 years and then later on for a period of 10 to 12 years is basically also a period of testing wherein the deity and the parivara devatas of that deity keep an eye and see if the individual is really committed or not. There will be in this phase people who pass through various ups and downs, but whether you can carry on that sadhana, whether you can stick to it in spite of whatever happens, that itself is the test of who will eventually succeed and who will not succeed. It has been one of the things, two of the things actually that has happened in terms of various people have at various points uh, indulged in a bit of fear mongering with respect to Ugra Devatas. While some caution is necessary, but it is not to the degree or to the kind of hyperbolization that has happened that should not approach any fierce deity and this is going to cause a negative reaction. That is absolutely not the experience of thousands of people, and that is absolutely not correct. It is more some kind of a peculiar a habit that some people have, that somehow you do a gatekeeping thing and you say that no, no, you should not do that, you should not do this. So at the end of the day, if you're scared in certain practices, if your mind is not uh, in tune with what you practice you want to do, then it is best not to do. I mean, if your mind is antagonized towards it, even if somebody does this very simple thing like Hanuman Chalisa, but your mind is antagonistic towards it, then the mind itself is going to cause problems. So first, you have to be very clear. First thing, that why you are doing it. Number two, is there a what happens when you worship a fierce deity? Some of the qualities enter into you. So you acquire that strength, that courage. Specifically, when you do Bhairava Namah Japa, it brings about a strange fearlessness into the individual eventually. It's not that your material circumstances will suddenly miraculously change. It can happen. It has happened to many people I know because I keep getting emails from all across the world and all across India. And I meet people occasionally, not that I want, it's not that I consciously meet when I'm traveling. If I meet somebody maybe in an airport or somewhere else, um, and I hear the testimonials from those people. So it's overwhelmingly positive responses that come. But still, you have to be clear in your head. The reason why you're doing this sadhana is so that you imbibe some qualities of the deity. You imbibe that fearlessness, the courage, the strength that is there inside Lord Bhairava, a little bit of it, so that you can go through any circumstance in life, any kind of issues that happens, any kind of karmic ups and downs come. It does not shake your core. That is a tremendous blessing. That is the first true step towards self transformation. Similarly, if you're worshipping Durga, if you're worshipping Tara, and in a simple way, the worship that can be done by a grihastha, not complicated ways of, very complicated tantric upasanas for which there are guidances that are needed. But there is a certain degree of upasana of a deity that can be done in a manner which is possible for a householder. Uh, in that sense, with a certain degree of strong bhakti and some smaller engagement that is possible, can also bring about a transformation in the individual, some blessings from the deity. And that blessings, the first of the blessings is to imbibe, to resonate some qualities of the deity inside, and that helps the person to navigate his or her own karmas eventually. There is a very good example that Sri Ramakrishna used to mention in his Kathamrita. There is an example where he says that the reason why deity upasana is to be done is, suppose somebody is destined to have an accident, by worshipping the names of the deity, by doing names of Durga, doing names of Vishnu, or doing names of Shiva, or any deity, simple upasana of the deity, helps to navigate that karma, so that whatever was the force of karma, it gets reduced. So if somebody was meant to have an accident, they may just have a small injury and pass off. That kind of a thing. That is the primary aim of any sadhana. All deity sadhanas, correctly done with a certain degree of faith and reverence, not out of fear, but out of faith and reverence and love. These things, when you do it this way, it brings about a change. It manipulates or reduces the karmic currents that you're supposed to face in your life. And once that happens, it brings, there's a through the power of the mantras, through the power of the names of the deity, even because the name itself is a mantra, it causes a change in the nature of the individual. And this itself is the biggest blessing that comes to any upasaka, because as you keep doing this, and again, when you do this for a period of 10 to 12 years unbroken, and you have the patience and the determination to do it through all odds, whatever happens in life, you still carry on. Such an individual is definitely meant to reach the highest stages of spiritual enlightenment, the different types of mukti that are described in the texts. So this is like a formation, this is like a test, and this also eventually, people who are very good in sadhana, your daily nitya upasana becomes your, like your daily food, your breakfast, or your food that you have. You, if you miss it in some day, you will feel very bad about not doing it, and there'll be a tremendous attraction, a pull for it. When do I get back to it? When do I think of, you think that when do I again sit for this japa or the sadhana that I'm doing? So like this, it becomes a self-sustaining process for anybody who's genuinely destined to reach the higher stages. So I think with this, we will move to quite a few of the question answers that have come. I would request the panelists or the others to, read out the questions that we have collected and gathered. Meanwhile, one more thing before we go to the questions, one more point I'll make. In Along with the collective sadhanas that we are doing, uh, going ahead this year, our primary focus is in the creation of the Bhairava temples. We'll be starting the work for that. We have me and few of people in my team. We have gone to different places looking for lands, finding specific, areas which are appropriate for the Bhairava sadhana, and we are in the process of selecting those lands, creating a model of the temples that needs to be created, talking to architects, talking to others who can help us in that. And also, in terms, eventually we may have to do some amount of fund collections for the temples as needed in coming times. But this 8 Bhairava temples that we have in mind, it is not a one-day project. It will take a few years at least, in my reckoning. If by the will of Bhagavan Bhairava, if this comes up, this will have a tremendously transformative effect across the land, for dharma, for the land, both in the spiritual realm as well as the material realm. Because of all forms, Bhairava is the specific form who guards a kshetra, and India of all places is designed in a way like a yantra of, like the primary yantra of Maa Kali. If you look at the formation of India in some ways, of Devi. And it is when and if, again, by the will of Lord Bhairava, if we are able to create the 8 temples that we have in mind, uh, it will have an impact that is going to last for a very long time for this whole land. And it will transform people, it will give a lot of positive energy, and it will protect this land from various kinds of attacks, whether it's spiritual attacks or any other kinds of things. So I think with that, we'll go into the question answers.
Thank you so much. So the first set of questions that we've received are around sadhana and the lifestyle changes that sadhana needs to bring, and sometimes the guilt that comes with it. So we're sort of paraphrasing the questions and combine the questions that we've received. So first question is, what changes should we bring in our lifestyle to be better in sadhana? And this question specifically is for those of us who are fully involved in family with kids, elders, other responsibilities, but we still want to go deep in sadhana. So, what lifestyle changes should we bring?
Okay. So the first thing is that, again, three words are very important in Deity Upasana: consistency, patience, and discipline, or consistency, discipline, and patience. Patience is the last of the three. Consistency means you have to carry on the sadhana every day. So uh, because everybody is engaged in life, you have your office work or whatever else. So during the day, you find out what is the period of time that you can spend on sadhana. And initially, even if it is 15 minutes, half an hour, it is fine. But try to maintain that half an hour time every day dedicated to the sadhana of the deities that you want to do. That is step number one. Step number two is to maintain consistency in that. So you have to carry on doing the same way. As I mentioned, sadhana should become like eating your food. However much work you may have, however much pressure of other things you have, you still don't forget to eat your food. Same way, sadhana cannot be forgotten. Even if you can't do in the morning, do in the afternoon, do in the evening, do in the night, uh, before 12 o'clock at night. But uh, carry on. First thing is that you fix a specific time that is possible, feasible for you, and then carry on that sadhana every day. Next step is consistency. So consistency means you have to carry on again, as I just now mentioned in my talk, that 3 years and 12 years. It's important to remember. This to really transform an individual, it is not a matter of 1, 2 months, 3 months. It doesn't work that way. If anybody has told you that, then I'm afraid that it is more of a hogwash. The real thing takes a lot of time. That is the evidence and the experience of great upasakas, and it is not going to be any different for you or me. So consistency is the other factor. You have to carry on doing this for years and ensure, at least initially, that you do not break the rhythm. Even if your mind is telling you one day that I'm bored or something like that, even if the concentration is not there, still maintain that discipline, because even doing mechanically also creates a certain energy and an aura and some changes, even if minor, happens deep inside you. And the third is you have to be very patient, because this is again like a long distance, race. It is not a 100-meter race. So these two factors come in, patience comes in. Eventually, transformation is definitely going to come to that upasaka. There is no doubt about it. This is like a law of nature. It is bound to happen. But these three factors are important. Along with it, once these three parameters basic are set in place, next thing that you do is, as you keep doing sadhana, you think of the deity and other times also, wherever your mind is free, or as in you are traveling to office, or you're doing in at a time when you're not engaged in your work. So that time also you keep thinking of the deity. You keep thinking that how can you serve the deity better? How can you be of more? How can you surrender to the deity better? How can you serve the deity better, whomsoever you're worshipping? And how can you change your own basic tendencies to some degree, which means certain amount of control of anger, certain amount of control of any other envy or any other kind of negative emotions that an individual has. Little bit of change and little bit of self reflection is a very good way that helps in the deity upasana, because at the end the whole aim is that you have to change yourself. If you remain exactly as you are, even after 30, 40 years of sadhana, and I've seen that in people, there's been no change in the basic, in the repos and the flaws that a human being generally is born with. Everybody is born with, and there's been no change in that. Then the question has to be asked, that what was the point of 30, 40 years of sadhana? That reflection is also important, and that reflection did not happen in the puja room. It can happen anywhere. So these things, if you keep in mind and you follow those on your own life, you will be more propelled towards a greater spiritual experience in time.
Thank you. Second question is sort of a continuation of the first one. So this one is basically while continuing sadhana, an upasaka might sometimes face some form of guilt, like guilt of not being able to do more japa or make more progress, or a self doubt if I'm competent, if I'm being honest to the deity enough, or am I just doing things to get material benefit. So while personally I'm aware that the answer to this question is to continue upasana, also feel like overcoming this is important. So please help and advise accordingly.
So, so guilt is an absolutely killer emotion. It destroys everything that you have spiritual inside you. It is far worse than the whatever it is which is making you feel guilty. The feeling of guilt is far worse than that. So there is no easy cure of this. There is no magical solution to remove guilt from a mind, but except to completely, constantly reiterate oneself that, okay, next time I'm not going to make that same mistake. Okay, next time I'll try to improve myself. I'll not make that mistake. Important again is not to break the sadhana under any circumstance. Guilt should not be like this that, I've seen in some cases in people, they become some rule they have put into place which they could not follow, and then they felt very guilty about it, and out of guilt they stopped sadhana. That is very bad to do, in my opinion. That is like, almost suicidal, spiritually suicidal. That is so. Under no circumstance you break your sadhana. If you have been guilty, then you do shama prarthana to the deity. You tell them honestly, very clearly, and it's like a one-on-one conversation that, okay, I am flawed, I made these mistakes, I tried, I could not do, whatever it is. Be completely 100% honest, because if you try to fool a deity, you are the one who is going to get it back very badly, because you can fool human beings, you can fool yourself, but you can never ever fool a deity. They see right down to your very bones and your DNA, that what is the secret motive, why you tried the sadhana, क्या तुम्हें चाहिए, कहाँ से तुम आ रहे हो, every A to Z they see from hundreds of lifetimes where you are coming. So you may not know yourself, but they know you very well. So be completely honest, without guilt, and it is okay to accept that you are flawed. Everybody is flawed. That is the whole point of the human condition is flawed. If there were no flaws in being a human being, there'd be no need to do sadhana. The whole point that we need to transform this flaws is to first accept that, okay, there is a flaw and I'm trying hard. Along with it, you pray to the deity that please help me to overcome this flaw. And then maybe there are cases when the deity may actually be very kind and input some energy of the deity into you so that that flaw gets removed. So that is the way to go about.
Then one question came that for all the Hindus living in India, it is advisable to do sadhana, but for those living overseas or those who are not born in Hindu households, how can they connect to Bhairav Tattva?
The best way is that first, in fact, Bhairava is a fantastic Devata to worship even out for people who are away from India. He is extremely fast and extremely competent in appearing to the Upasaka in various forms, to nimittas, and blessing the sadhaka. I know of many cases where people who are not in India who send emails to me that they started doing Bhairava Namah Japa and they had been transformative and positive experiences in their lives, sometimes in the form of dreams or sometimes in the form of nimittas, etc. So the basic idea is same. You start with the Nama Japa of Bhairava and you carry that on for some period of time. Increase your devotion, increase your faith, increase your shraddha, and there is a organic response you will find from the deity. You will find a transformative change that happens, and then according to the krama, then eventually after you have done that, and as I mentioned in some of my videos as well. So once you have finished a certain amount of japa, then you can go to the other mantras of Vatuka Bhairava and other things. So it is perfectly all right for anybody to do the basic japa of Bhairava Nama wherever they may be in the world, as long as they do it with a sense of reverence and faith, and keep it simple. Don't make it too complicated. Follow the guidelines that have been sent. A simple bhoga, that is, naivedyam, that can be given, maybe a sweet or something, a little bit of water, some flowers, simplest of things that is easiest to offer, nothing complicated. And then you have a Rudraksha mala and you do the japa. After the japa, you keep the mala in your puja space. Every day you carry on. Patience, discipline, consistency, these three things. You will start seeing some impact of the mantras in your life and the blessings of Bhairava.
And the last question in the series is basically The person is asking if it's possible to get material gains from Bhairav sadhana and Kamakhya sadhana, wealth and other things.
Absolutely. I mean, there are a lot of cases I know where people have had very strong material benefits that have come to them through the upasana of both Bhairava and Kamakhya or other deities, even Tara. But there are certain conditions to this. It is not a free for all. Free for all in the sense that there are so when there is a prayoga that is done, for example, if somebody needs some material wealth and there is a specific kind of prayoga that is done, then one has to take into account various factors. If there are first is the grahas have to be taken into account. No prayoga ever works properly until the grahas are taken. In fact, the grahas are so important that even in a formal tantra puja of a devata, one of the things we do is give it some ahutis, some offerings to all the navagrahas first, before even going to the other deities and the parivaras and all that. So it is very important. If there are certain fundamental blockages and flaws in the horoscope for material gains, then a deity is not going to go and remove that so easily until you take corrective measures in terms of pariharams. To do pariharams, you have to meet somebody, maybe a competent astrologer or somebody on whom you have faith and who you think is capable of doing. Because just because somebody says they know astrology, it does not necessarily mean that they actually know it well. And then you do the pariharams and then you do the sadhanas. It can help. But this is the thing about prayogas, which means prayoga means you have a specific result in mind and you approach the deities with that kind of an idea. There is nothing wrong in that. This is also a part of dharma, because we see that the falastuti of all deities will mention that you chant this so you gain vidya, or you gain freedom from diseases, or you can remove your shatrus, or you can gain some material benefits. But these come with certain conditions. The sadhana that we promote in Kamakhya Bhairava Upasaka Foundation is mostly with the aim of Dharma Raksha and also an individual spiritual transformation. In the process, there are people who face many material gains and benefits. I know a lot of cases uh, that has happened because, again, even in the people in my core group, as well as people who are outside who mail me. But the point is that I don't want to highlight that too much, because that will divert your mind. See, if you're doing a 10-year sadhana of Bhairava, if you're even forget Bhairava, if you're doing a 10-year Hanuman Chalisa sadhana, Hanuman Chalisa, which is the safest of all things, there will be years when you will face terrible difficulties, because that is your destiny. There will be years when you will face various good things happening. Are these linked to the sadhana? Not at all. The sadhana's aim is to transform you, to to reduce the impact of your karmas, negative karmas to an extent. But no deity is going to completely obliterate all your karmas, because when you were performing those karmas, you did not take permission from the deities. So they are never going to remove it fully. To some degree, you have to bear the brunt of things that you might have done in the past. But at least when you are engaged with the deity, when you have that love, devotion, shraddha towards the deity, it gives you the power to sustain uh, that karmic phase that you will pass through, and with the least amount of damage you pass through into a greater development. That is the key aim of sadhana. So yes, material benefits can come, there is no doubt about it. Simplest way is to pray for it. Then prayer is in your hands, in anybody's hands. Anybody can pray. Whether the deity will listen to the prayer or not, it's up to the deity. Prayogas are different. As I mentioned, prayoga is where you actually force a specific kind of result. I do not encourage prayogas for masses. This requires practice, and this requires discipline, and this requires certain higher knowledge. Uh, for that, you first have to start with removing the fundamental issues if there are in the individual's horoscope.
Okay, so the next set of questions is related to mantra sadhana and meditation. First of which is, can we chant Om Bhairavaya Namah, or should we chant Brahm Bhairavaya Namah? Does Om Bhairavaya Namah require initiation? How to handle differing opinions related to initiation requirements?
Okay, so this is a question that comes up often. Uh, First point is Om Bhairavaya Namah. Can you chant that? Absolutely. There are hundreds of thousands of people actually who've been chanting it. There is no problem with that. So the difference is, first you have to understand the core principle of mantra sadhana. Uh, when you add a vija to the mantra, that is not omkar. Omkar is the fundamental, the in a way the greatest of all mantras, greatest of all mantric sounds is the omkar. But if you add a vija, Bhairava has many vijas, by the way. any of the Vijas, whether, see, if you are adding a Bija, Vam Bhairavaya Namah, Brahm Bhairavaya Namah, each of the uh, consonant sounds that you're adding add to certain tattvas into the Vija and activate certain energies inside an individual. It makes the mantra far sharper and stronger. But when you're doing a stronger mantra, you will also require a stronger amount of uh, self-sustaining ability for an individual, so that if there is a powerful urja of Bhairava that comes, you have the ability to sustain it and you do not get rattled by it. On the other hand, when you do an Om Bhairavaya Namah, Omkar has a powerful, it's like of all mantras, it's like a mantra that helps to curtail the various spikes in the energy that happens in other mantras. In fact, to give a counter example, to give another example, it's easier to understand. And I mentioned this in a podcast with Swami Yo uh, last year. So there are two opinions when it comes to the Navarna mantra. You will see people chanting in many places in North India. I've seen people chanting, adding the Om to the Navarna mantra. Whereas when you're doing mantra sadhana, as per the texts, they tell you that Om should not be added to the Navarna mantra of Ma Durga. The whole point is, if you chant both, is there a harm going to happen if you add Om to Navarna mantra? No. In fact, what it does is that the three Vijas inside the Navarna mantra, it creates a very strong spike in energy when you are trying to aim for 1 lakh or 5 lakh or 9 lakh japa of the mantra. And the Upasaka is meant to handle that energy. If you want Siddhi of the mantra Siddhi, if you want, then that Vijas become important. And there are a few other rules also that come into play. Whereas on the other hand, when Omkar is added to the mantra, it kind of holds back the energy of the mantra from completely unleashing its peak urja. So that becomes like a kind of a safety net for the individual. On the flip side, what happens is that when you add Omkar to the Ravana mantra, attaining mantra siddhi becomes very difficult, if not impossible. But then if you judge practically, even if you remove Omkar and if you chant the normal Navana mantra, 90% of the people will not attain Siddhi of the mantra. It is not so easy because Siddhi requires various other parameters to come into play. So, taken all this into account, if somebody is chanting with Om, there is not going to be any great damage. Rather, there will be some amount of blessing from the deity, depending on the amount of bhakti and shraddha that the individual has. Same way, when you do Om Bhairavaya Namah, it is not going to cause any damage, far from causing any damage. On the other hand, it helps to contain the energy into a level that is easier for the Upasaka to handle, because this mantra also came to me at a very inspired stage. It is not something I had consciously thought of. When I first, asked people to do this mantra, I did not even think that it would come to a stage where people on Ashtami Tithis are doing almost 80 lakhs to 1 crore of japa of that mantra organically. So there is some divine force behind why this mantra became popular. And I think it's perfectly all right to do Om Bhairavaya Namah Japa, because it helps to keep the energy into a state where it is easier for the Upasaka to handle, easier for the Upasaka to assimilate that energy. So it is not only about generating a Shakti. Shakti Upasana, and all Mantra Upasana is in a way Shakti Upasana. One must be able to digest that Shakti. So when you do Om Bhairavaya Namah, it helps you to digest that Shakti, it helps you to orient yourself into a more spiritual format. There is another aspect to this for the completion of this answer. So there is a rule in the Vedic Mantra Shahstras that Om is not to be chanted by certain varnas for women, etc. There are certain rules. So here it must be mentioned, two things are important. First of all, this rule is not necessarily followed in the Tantric Mantra Shastra and the Mantra Krama. Why? Typical example I'll give you is the Rudrayamal Tantra gives the Vatuk Bhairava Apadudharaka mantra, which is so famous and available across the internet these days. It starts with an Om. So the default setting is that it will start with an Om. And Rudrayamal is one of the older tantras, which is perhaps 7th century or 8th century tantra, which mentions the Vatuk Bhairava mantra has to start with an Om. So it's a default setting. Whereas the same mantra, when it comes to the the compilation of the tantras, like the Brihat Tantra Shar, which is about 15th century or 16th century text. So they remove the Om from there and they change it with the the tantric Maya Vija, which starts, there is no Om, there's a 21 Akshari mantra, and it follows the rules that, okay, it requires an initiation and things like that, etc. So my point is that there are mantras which already have Om placed in it. We have evidence of it from older texts, even Mantra Mahadadi, as well as certain Bagalamukhi mantras, certain the older Vatuk Bhairava mantra. So it is perfectly all right in the Tantric Krama to chant a mantra which has Omkar in it, provided it has come as an Upadesham from somebody competent. It is very important about the Upadesham part, because here the next question comes in is about Diksha. There are these days hundreds of places where all sorts of Dikshas are given, and I will not go into commenting on each one of them. I like to keep my opinion reserved in this matter. But traditionally, strictly by the scriptures, when one does Tantra Upasana, there are two ways of Diksha that happens. One is an Upadesham, which is where somebody who is competent can give you an advice on the mantra. This Upadesham can happen in multiple ways. And the Upadesham should come from somebody who has at least a Purnavishek Diksha in Tantra Sadhana when it comes to Tantric mantras. In fact, once a person has a Purnavishek Diksha, he or she can give Upadeshan on any mantra. It's like believed to be that that individual is like a secret Avadhuta. So he has unlocked for himself or herself the capacity to do any sadhana, any mantra, and also give Upadesham of any deity mantra with or without Omkar to anybody. This is the first rule in Tantra to be remembered. Number two, but before the actual Diksha process happens, which can be a little complicated, if we go by the traditional Diksha methods, uh, not necessarily what passes off with Dikshas various places, that is the advice, the Upadesham that I mentioned. So where somebody competent tells you that, okay, you can do this mantra, you chant this mantra, and then later on, if it is destined for the individual, if the individual feels like it, if the guru feels like it, they may actually initiate them into the higher forms of Diksha. So there are stages of Diksha. It's not one Diksha, by the way. In Tantra, it starts from Shakta Vishek, Purna Vishek, Krama Diksha, this, that. Lot of stages of Diksha are there. Diksha is to be taken, in my opinion, by people who are seriously engaged in Tantra Sadhana, not the casual fancy, some little bit I want to do. No. So there is a whole lot of Upasana and blessings also that you can get even by simple Bhakti Marg, some Mantra Japa, basic Mantra Japa, some basic Nama Japa of the deities, Ashtottara, Stotras, Stutis of the deity, while being at home in a simple format and not engaging in the Tantric Karma Kanda. Karma Kanda is very different. When you do the Tantric Karmakanda, then you require Diksha. Tantric Karmakanda is not meant for everybody to do. But these deities, again, as I mentioned, whether it's Tara, whether it's Kali, there are hundreds of people I know who worship them with even simple bhakti. Basic. Some Ashtottara you're doing, little bit of sweets you're offering, some flowers you're offering, some water you're offering, and dhoop you're offering, Naivedyam you're offering, Agarbatti you're offering. That is good enough to do. So all in all, my opinion is very clear. All mantras are fine, but Om Bhairavaya Namah is a perfectly valid, absolutely okay mantra to do. At the end of the day, it is the evidence of people. As I said, when I started this, it was a very organic thing. And today, in over 3 years' time, on an Ashtami, we have more than 80 lakhs of japa of the mantra. And there are innumerable people who have benefited from it. If there was really going to be a negative impact, we would have had overwhelming responses of negative impact. On the contrary, what we have is an overwhelming response of positive benefits that have come to people on their own by the blessings of Lord Bhairava. If this is not divinely ordained, I don't know what else is.
Thank you, sir. The next question in the same category is, during Mantra Japa, I often go into a state of meditation, sometimes a trance state, after one or two malas. How do I navigate this? Should I focus more on meditation or the mantra counts?
Okay. So very good. If you go into a deeper state in Mantra Japa, that means that your sadhana is taking into higher stages. This is the beginning of the higher stages. It is always good because at the end, the tantras also mention that even higher than japa is dhyanam. But dhyanam is not so easy for everybody. So as you do Mantra Japa, it takes you slowly into a very deep, very powerful state, and it generates a sense of bliss inside. And that is the very key thing in sadhana, very important thing. It comes eventually to everybody. Some it may start initially, some may take some time. So when this happens, two things you have to do. A, if you are into an anushthan at that time, which means you have taken a sankalpa that you will do so many malas every day for this period of time, then you carry on the counts. It is important to finish the counts as it is. Number two, if it is not an anushthan, if it is a Nitya Upasana that you are doing, and you feel that sense of bliss, you feel that sense of depth, you feel that deeper trance kind of state that is happening, then do not leave the mantra, but do the chanting slowly. So enjoy both, complete the counts, but at the same time also enjoy that state that comes in. There is no harm in that. In fact, it is a very positive state. And in that state, right after you finish the japa, you completely mentally pray and surrender to the deity, that he or she guide you and take you into deeper zones of sadhana. That is, so basically, if you're doing an anushthan, then you keep track, then you bring your mind back into the count, how many malas you're finishing, because anushthan means you have taken a sankalpa. So it is good to finish the sankalpa. But if you have not taken a sankalpa, if you're doing Nitya Upasana and you're feeling that state of trance and bliss, it's a good thing. I mean, that means that you are entering slowly into that higher zones. This is the beginning. Everybody will have to go through this someday.
So the next question in dhyana is, how do I know whether my dhyana is going well? I have been putting my dhyana of the deity as a white light with the formation of the deity. How do I know if it is working?
It's very simple. Are you enjoying it? Ask yourself that. So eventually, once you go deeper, you will feel that there is a bliss that generates of something that attracts you, something that makes you think, "Ki, when do I get to sit next?" When that happens, then you know that something is working inside. Whether your conscious mind can process it or not is a different matter. Of the human mind, the conscious aspect of the mind is the weakest. The subconscious and the semi-conscious aspects are far more deeper. Your mantra actually works there. Your mantra causes a transformation there. So check for the very simplest of things, that are you enjoying it? Is this causing a sense of bliss? Is this creating that sense that, no, I want to sit next day again? How do I sit? You wait for the time when you can sit for your sadhana. That feeling, that attraction, that generation of bliss inside is the best hallmark, best parameter to judge that your sadhana is on the right track. And apart from that, the other things that I said, consistency, discipline, patience, and also a little bit of detachment from the material world. Any deity upasana you do, deities are very spiritual. Spiritual means they're literally of a different realm. So as you try to engage with them, it makes you a little bit less engaged with the material world. It brings about a sense of detachment, and that is very good to have. With that detachment, once you go about doing whatever you have to do in the world, it reduces the karmic impact of activities that you do. It makes you more steady, blissful. It reduces stress, which has its own health benefits. So overall, the idea is, you see, if you are enjoying it, that bliss inside is the key parameter that brings and makes everything worthwhile.
So the next question is, how do we know that Devata is responding and we are progressing? And
Okay.
and the continuation of that question is, any guidance on meditation and dhyana for beginners?
Uh, Dhyana is a very difficult thing to attain by itself. But first thing is that, like all else, start practicing. If you're absolutely newbie to dhyana, then after you finish your japa, set an alarm for 10 minutes and just sit quiet. Let your mind run anywhere, does not matter. Try to keep your focus on the deity, but it will not, after some time, the mind will waver here and that, does not matter. But keep it by the clock 10 minutes every day. In this manner, if you keep doing, one day your mind will become steady and you will be able to do dharana on the deity, hold it together, whether it's on the white light inside, whether it's the deity. uh, Again, it's again not a one day thing. Through practice, you have to keep doing. And every day when you do dhyana, don't count the malas or anything. Do it at the end of the process. 10 minutes you keep, and start doing that day after day after day. Eventually one day it will happen. So first thing is to sit steadily, sit very steadily, not running around or anything. Just sit steadily at the initial stages for doing the dhyana. What was the other part of the question? I forgot.
How do we know that Devata is responding and we are progressing?
Okay, this is a bit of a tricky thing. Devata is responding. There are ways to find out uh, through nimittas and dreams and other experiences. But at the initial stages, the best option for an individual is that um, uh, to have a complete faith and surrenderance on the deity. So it is not necessarily that you do the japa with the idea that there has to be some magical realization or manifestation of the deity right in front of you. But you start it with the idea that, okay, uh, I will carry this on till the time there is a transformation There's an experience, there's a love that generates for the deity. So this generation of Shraddha and that love and the faith is an individual, that is a part of the sadhana. So as I mentioned, you do the mantra sadhana or whatever you're doing for a specific period of time, 30 minutes a day or something. And other times you keep thinking of the deity, you keep thinking that how exactly can you improve your relationship to the deity. So that is where these things come in. So don't look for, don't crave for science. That's a weakness of the mind that will spoil your sadhana. Be very steady. First, ask yourself that how do I improve myself? How do I improve myself? How do I become steady? How do I become calmer? How do I become more detached? How is my mind getting more? Why is my mind not getting more filled with the love or the attraction or an attachment towards the deity? Ask what changes can you do to yourself rather than asking that why is the deity not responding. If you're impatient, nothing is going to work because these things take a lot of time. I told you 3 years, 12 years, and if you go to very traditional, powerful siddhas, they will say 12 years is nothing. It takes lifetimes of sadhana. 12 years is the small point I'm saying. So start with judging yourself, not with why is the deity not coming. Because if that is the attitude, you will not be able to sustain. After some months, you'll get bored and you'll remain out. This is not the path for you then.
The next question is, instead of Bhairavaya Namah Mantra, I started with Maha Ganapati Naama Mantra. Can you please tell me the difference in the nature of these deities? Does Maha Ganapati ji lead to the same tantric paths as Bhairava? What is the difference?
No. So I will. So here we will stick to only answering the questions related to the deities that we are, the sadhanas, Vishesh sadhanas that we are doing, because all deities have their own pros and cons, and that goes into an off track. A lot of other things comes into. Ganpati is powerful and beautiful, and there are many things in Ganpati sadhana. But at this moment, we will only stick to those deities because there are a lot of questions which are related to the sadhanas that we are doing and the sadhanas that we are doing through the Vishesh sadhanas.
Okay. The next set of questions is around people who have already done sadhanas for 2 years or have completed
Yes.
1.5 lakhs of japa. So there are questions around what to do next after doing the sadhana for 2 years, participating consistently in the Vishesha sadhana, or have done 1.5 lakhs of japa. So what to do next? So that is the set of question. Yeah.
Right. So, so if you have done the Bhairava Japa, the point is once you do 1 lakh or more of the Bhairava Japa, and I've mentioned this in some of the videos as well. There are two additional things that come in. One is that you can start doing the Vatuka Bhairava Mula Mantra after that. Okay. But when you do the Vatuka Mula Mantra, you still need to carry on Om Bhairavaya Namah. But even if it is little bit, even if may not be the amount of malas you were doing, because you have to juggle your time between different mantras. So you may reduce this thing, but you can still carry on the Vatuka Bhairava Mula Mantra. It is a very good transition that happens when one goes from this Om Bhairavaya Namah to the Vatuka Bhairava sadhana. Along with it, you can do the Kal Bhairavashtakam and other things. So this is the krama slowly. This is again the initial stages. There are more Bhairava mantras, more Kala Bhairava mantras and sadhanas, some of which I will, if I feel inspired in my own if I feel inspired, if I get the right intuition, I will make videos on that in this year. But for now, the idea is that you keep doing the sadhanas. Along with it, you expand to the Vatuka Bhairava mantra. Apart from that, the Vishesh sadhanas that we do in a month also includes deities like Durga and Tara, etc. It is good to do those sadhanas and also engage in those sadhanas along with it. So it creates a more comprehensive transformation in the individual. So Bhairava is the gateway, is the doorway to whether you want to go to higher kramas of Bhairava sadhana, to Devi Upasana, or even, and this is a small bit, but this is also a part of it, to Shiva Upasana also. Either of these three paths open up for an individual. So Bhairava becomes the foundation, is the fuel. So even if you're going to Bhairava, if you feel a more attraction towards Vatuka Bhairava, so you do Vatuka Bhairava sadhana, but your main Om Bhairavaya Nama still carries on because that Nama has a transformative power on an individual. Along with it, you do Durga 32 names of Ma Durga, which is very, very powerful. It is one of those sadhanas that has been opened up for people without any restriction. And this was also a sadhana that was propagated and, very positively propagated by the Mahaswami who used to stay in Datia, who was the great Bagalamukhi Upasaka, because this is absolutely powerful. There's 32 names of Maa Durga. There is no limit to what can be done if a person engages with it in a very calm and devotional manner without trying to in a standard proper upasana method. Or those who are associated with the Kamakhya Bhairava Upasaka Foundation, as I mentioned right at the beginning, because there's a very strong current of blessings of Maa Tara that work through us because of the sevas that we are able to offer to her. And in December, we did a collective japa, and then we could offer some abhushanas and ayudhas to Maa Tara. So anybody who engages in the simple nama of Maa Tara and the Ashtottara will also feel the blessings and an inspiration from Maa Tara. There is absolutely no doubt about it. So deities have the way in which they connect to certain places, certain individuals, certain organizations. It is those deities which have some kind of a blessing and connection to me and to this formation of the organization, the Kamakhya Bhairava Upasaka Foundation. It is their upasana that we ask people to do in a simple format that can be done by grihasthas or people who did not require some complicated paddhati to do it. And therefore, if you do Tara Upasana, it is also going to build up a certain change in the mind and transform the individual and open up his mind and open up his life in various ways, apart from bringing us strength to go through any kind of hardship. So that is the thing, both with Maa Tara and Bhairava. So after doing 1 to 1 lakh, 2 lakh of japa, you also broaden your horizons into inculcating simple upasanas of Maa Durga or Maa Tara or Vatuko Bhairava, or sometimes you can do all of them. That is absolutely fine. That is how this thing has been designed. Along with it, you also start doing smaller anushtans of the deity. Say Om Bhairavaya Namah only, you can do a Laghu Anushthan. You decide that I want to do 500 malas of the japa in so many days. You take a sankalpa and you finish that. And then if you know how to do homas or if you know how to do Tarpan Marjana ityadi, you can do. At the end of the day, you can visit any Bhairava temple or any Shiva temple and make some offerings, maybe a dhoti or some coconuts or something, and say that you have finished the sadhana. So this is the krama. So now add to this the first thing that I said, you will need 12 years of sadhana, 3 to 12 years. So what are you going to do in this 12 years? Not new mantras every year. The same thing you keep doing over and over and over. You keep doing by practice of the same mantra, the same thing, the same paddhati, it becomes more refined, deeper and deeper and deeper, and really causes a transformation. You don't need to dig in 10 different places. You have to dig in one place, but you have to keep digging for years before it actually brings about an absolute, solid, palpable change in the individual.
Got it. So on a related note, one more question is, I have done sadhana consistently for the last 2 years. So when I'm visiting kshetras like Ujjain, Kashi, how to approach visiting a kshetra and what to do in a kshetra?
Okay, so good question. In my opinion, if you're an upasaka, don't go like a tourist. Tourist going means you just go there, quickly have darshan, then take some selfies and come back. So that is not the way you should approach. The ideal way is, if possible, stay for at least 1 night or 3 nights in that kshetra. Okay, that goes for all kshetras, whether it's Kashi, whether it's Kamakhya, whether it's other places. And then in that place, you have darshan of the deity. When you have darshan, before that you decide what can you bring for the deity, and it need not be something costly, as something as simple as a coconut, something as simple as a sari, something as simple as some flowers. But you do it, as you do it with the devotion of that you are making an offering uh, along with the mantras that you have been chanting. So it's important, when you're staying for 1 day or 2 day or 3 day, you also do the sadhana of the deity. So if you're doing Bhairava sadhana, you stay in Kashi and you do the Bhairava mantras. You sit in the ghat, you sit near the temple and visit the temple 1 day, make some offerings, tell Bhairava that you have been trying to do, and may the blessings of Bhairava be with you. And then you do your sadhana there. That is the way to approach doing, when you're doing a kshetra as an upasaka. The upasaka thinks very differently from a normal visit to the temple. So if you carry this on, and I mentioned this earlier also, that if you're worshipping a deity, any deity, so if you're worshipping Maa Tara, for example, try to make a visit to Tarapet at least once a year. Stay for 2, 3 days, have darshan there, sit in the temple complex and do the same mantras or the Ashtottara of Maa Tara, etc. Like this, it develops a stronger relationship with the deity. The whole point of sadhana is this, to build a stronger relationship. So that is how you should approach when you're trying to go to a Kshetra.
Yeah, since you mentioned about Marjana, Tarpana, and Homa, there is a question related to that. How can one learn to do Homa, Tarpana, and Marjana? Can this be learned without having a guru or Diksha? If yes, can Kamakhya Bhairava Upasaka Foundation please create some documentations for us so that we can perform our own while doing the Anushtans and Vishesha Sadhana? So, yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So we are going to work on that this year, and we will have certain documentations of doing a simple Homa Paddhati of the mantras, along with Tarpan, Marjan, etc. And if needed, some of our people in the group may even create certain simple videos for doing that. So Tarpan, Marjan are very easy to do. If you learn it once, you can do it easily for any deity. Homa, with respect to Homa, there are multiple Paddhatis of Homa across India. All of them are fine. Homa is a very powerful method, but it should, as I have mentioned, as I've maintained a stance very obviously for a very long time, those who've been following me, they are well aware that you should do homas only after you have done sufficient japa. Then only this becomes an integrated process and brings about a real transformation. This is the way that actually the great siddhas and the people who have attained to the highest states have done. Uh, Homas avoid the lure of doing, randomly, just like that homas. Instead of that, homa becomes a process, anga, a limb of the mantra sadhana of the seva of the deity. So sufficient amount of japa, then 1/10 of that you do homas, then tarpan marjit. That becomes the correct method, and then only the mantra works perfectly. Instead, if you leave any of these and pick just one thing, why just homa? Say you do tarpana endlessly and do nothing else, that will also cause a disbalance eventually. If you do marjana endlessly and do nothing else, it's going to cause a disbalance. If you do homa endlessly of the mantra without having done sufficient japa, it is 100% going to cause a disbalance, because that is not a method through which anybody ever has attained to the highest states. If it were a actual method, then people, siddhas, would have been doing it till now. Nobody has done that because it doesn't work. But only when you are integrating it properly with the mantra sadhana, and you do it a few times, in that you do in the form of a purushthan or anushthan few times, then it becomes very powerful. And after a certain stage of sadhana with that specific mantra, one acquires the capability to do prayogas, applications of the mantra through fire or homa at will. But that comes at a later stage. It is not something that happens on day one, and it is not something we would like to focus on, because our audience is more or less large, vast numbers of lakhs and lakhs of people who may or may not have initiation. So that is why the sadhanas that I give are specifically designed to cater into take into account the lowest common the parameters, so that it is more and more people can do that, instead of making it very obtuse and keeping only 101 different rules for a very complicated sadhana. It's better to do Om Bhairavaya Namah, the simple sadhanas, which also will bring a lot of positive changes, as is evident from the reactions of people that I see in my So we will create documents for that. We'll create a simple Homa document. We'll create Tarpana Marjana document. If needed, if possible, we'll create certain videos of it this year, so that people can do those sadhanas after they have done certain amount of mantra japa, at least a lakh of mantra of the basic mantras that has been completed. Yeah. Any more
Okay.
questions?
Yeah, there are more
Yeah.
there are more questions. So one question is that basically this theme of questions is like I've completed X lakhs of japa and what to do next. So one question specifically asks that how important are anushtanas apart from Nitya Sadhana to connect with the deity, and why?
Okay. So there are two aspects to it. Nitya sadhana is also fine. It's very beautiful. If you can carry on a Nitya sadhana for 12 years unbroken, at the same time, this is the catch. If you can do it at the same time every day for 12 years unbroken, and the simplest of mantras, you will not even need an anushthan. But for 99% people, they don't have the mental tenacity, the patience, or the perseverance to go through this kind of a sadhana. This itself is a sadhana, to make your mind so steady that 12 years you're not going to be shaken from the time, even it's the simplest of mantras. And obviously, as I keep mentioning, if you're doing a 12-year sadhana of a deity, in between you will have ups and downs. All sorts of things will happen in your life, because that itself is the test. Are you able to sustain through that? If you sustain 12 years, then the deity is going to take notice of you, and then your life, then they are not going to leave you for lifetimes. You will change very dramatically because of that. So now, the other thing that Anushthan's importance is that it is like a very concentrated dose of sadhana of the mantra that comes into the individual. So since we do not have, most people actually, not we, but most of us in the kind of lifestyle that we lead, very few people have that consistency that they will be able to do the Nitya Upasana at the same time every day for 12 years. So therefore, the other option is once you finish a certain amount of japa, say basic 1 lakh or more of the japa, then you do a more concentrated anushthan, smaller anushtans, maybe 240 malas, 500 malas, things like that in few days. It is like having a kind of a, how would I put it? So concentrated medicine, some specific supplements or vitamins you are having, so that it brings about a greater change in yourself, stronger change. So that is the whole point of these anushtans. And once you do the lahu, smaller anushtans, eventually the main thing is that you do mantra purushcharan. Purushcharan is where you do 1 lakh with sankalpa, homa 1/10, tarpana, marjana, and finally bhojana related to there. And in between you have to do certain pujas of the deities. We'll make, in a document, we'll make this eventually, so that's easier for people to do. So once you do the mantra purushcharana, basically it is the path towards the mantra siddhi, the perfection of the mantra devata connection. So it works through all the tattvas. The mantra is working through your vayu tattva when you're doing japa, and then through agni, jal, prithvi, everything it is working. And the bhojanam is to be done so that if there are any flaws, in fact, the tantras are very categorical that japa is irreplaceable. You have to do japa. Baki, havan, tarpan, marjan, all of these can be replaced. Bhojanam is also irreplaceable because it removes any doshas or flaws that you might have acquired in the process of the sadhana. Which is another reason why we do Annadanam. We like to do Annadanam because in case there are any flaws by any of the upasakas that are doing, by participating in Annadanam, by providing for Annadanam, it removes those doshas from the individual. So therefore, the aim is that the Anushtan and the Purushcharana, the more you do, multiple Anushtans, multiple Purushcharas, the mantra and your connection becomes stronger and stronger and more powerful. So that is why we, offer to do that, Anushtans.
Right. So it's kind of related. A lot of people have basically completed 1.5 lakhs or 2 lakhs japa. So their main question is, what are the next steps? How can they go further?
Okay. So again, the next thing is to start doing Anushtans, smaller Anushtans of the deity. And each Anushtan you can make it. And apart from that, there are various sadhanas that I've put forth, like the 40 plus days of Kal Bhairava Anushtan, Kal Bhairava Ashtakam sadhana, Vatuk Bhairava sadhana, Maa Tara sadhana. So focus on these. Apart from that, the mantra in which you have completed 1 lakh, do anushtans of that, do multiple anushtans. Because again, see, in the very traditional krama, they used to say not just anushtan, purushcharana of the mantra, at least 7 purushcharanas of the mantra were required for a person to progress from one stage to the another. 7 complete purushcharana by the book with the vidhana, which means traditional method of Purush requires during the time of Purusharana, you don't step out of eat people and you sit at the specific time, then you do pujas of the deity at specific times. In that format, if somebody does 7 Purusharana, it 100% causes absolutely life-changing transformation. But today, it is not so easy to do those things for most of us. So we do Laghu Anushtans, even concentrated smaller Anushtans, 200 mala, 100 mala, 250 mala. The more you do this, the more it brings about a strength, a connection to the mantra, to the process. At the end of the day, your meditation will go deeper, your connection to the deity will go deeper. And by repeating this process over and over through the years, it is going to bring about the change that you're looking for. Yeah.
So the next question is on Maa Tara.
Hmm.
It is often said that Maa Tara sadhana at night can be scary for beginners. What does it actually mean by scary? Jai Maa Tara.
Oh, yeah, so Jai Maa Tara, it is not scary. I don't think it is scary. It would be a wrong, not the correct word, because when we use words sometimes verbally, we may think something and we may use a different word. So let's just say Maa Tara is fierce. But if you look at her as a mother, if you have that strong connection, if an individual himself or herself that has that type of a personality. So there are people, all sorts of people in the world. There are some who will be extra soft. There are people who are a little sharper and strong in mind. For them, it is not going to be scary at all. My suggestion, however, is that initially when you are doing the sadhanas of Maa Tara, start off during the daytime. And once you graduate to once you've completed for 6 months or more of the sadhana consistently, so your personal energy is in tune with the energy of the mantras of the Ashtottara that you are doing, then you can start doing at night. Uh, yes, Purushcharana of Tara mantras are aggressive. I am not denying that. They have an aggressive component, but we are not advocating, I am not advocating anybody to do Purushcharana of the Tara mantra right in the beginning. The sadhanas that are given for Maa Tara are things that can be done along with a little bit of bhakti, in fact, a strong component of bhakti and devotion towards Maa Tara. Once you do that, it is going to automatically take care of various things. Yes, so initially when you start, it is better to start during the daytime. Then later, few months, 6 months or something, once you are in tune with the Ashtottara, in tune with the basic mantra that is given, then you can do in a more meditative format at night also. Uh, so it is perfectly all right. Mantra has a lot of mantra, various kramas of mantra. There are stronger mantras of Tara, which I have not recommended ever in a public platform. Only in the case of specific individuals, if my intuition had guided that they should do that, only those individuals have maybe one or two, not more than that. So those mantras require certain steadiness. Again, at the end of the day, if you have been doing the basic Bhairava sadhana, then it brings about the Adhara Shakti, the steadiness in mind and body, so that you can handle any of the other sadhanas without getting, dislodged from your center of equilibrium. So that is the key thing. There's nothing to be scared of, but start in the daytime and then slowly graduate to the night. It is perfectly all right. Again, when I say night, I don't mean after 12. One has to start before 12.
Got it. So the one of the questions that the next question is Namaste Rajashri ji, is it possible to know through a horoscope or planetary position in Kundalini which Devata Upasana helps an individual in upliftment of the soul?
Yeah, so to a certain degree, one can find out through horoscope, but it is a very vast topic. And first of all, the individual who is seeing the horoscope must have the specific knowledge and must have applied that knowledge. Just having theoretical knowledge, these days, every second person knows astrology. It's not a big deal. But how far of that knowledge actually works, and especially in the spiritual realm, it becomes more complicated. So to know a deity, which is the right deity, sometimes there could be multiple forms of deities specific to an individual. Then there are deities whom individual might have worshipped at a past life, but the worship did not mature. So they have to still do a little bit of seva or japa of the deity, even though the deity may not be his or her Ishta Devata in this time. So all these are possible, yes. So looking at the horoscope, one can have some idea of what is the nature of deities, if not the specific deity, what is the nature of deity that is more suitable for the individual.
Okay.
Provided the astrologer is competent. That is the key factor.
So we have 10 more minutes.
Yeah.
So if you want to have any closing thoughts, you can, or we can continue with the questions. Up to you.
Let's have one more question.
Okay.
And then
So can we shift our sadhana method from Dakshinachara to Vamachara or vice versa? How can you comment about these things?
so first of all is that the sadhanas that we encourage people to do, I encourage people to do, is not the very typical Tantra sadhana. Tantra sadhana requires more teaching and all that. But the deities are tantric, and we engage with them in a manner of simple mantra sadhanas, along with. So what I mean is that we are not engaging in the tantric karma kanda, full karma kanda. Full karma kanda requires various other things involved in it. So this is the more simpler japa of the deity, simpler engagement with the deity, having that strong feeling of devotion with the deity. Now, when people say Vamachara, they mean basically that, say, offerings of meat or offerings of fish or other things, etc. That's a part of Vamachara. All these are, so whether the Panchatattvas are offered, whether it's a cremation ground sadhana that is happening, these are Vamachara. All come under the realm of Vamachara. Here, the simple thumb rule to follow is two. One is that these are in the realm of Vamachara, but don't confuse that, in Tarapit, for example, anybody can offer fish to the Maa Tara. Every day there is a fish offered, multiple, fishes are cooked in a specific way and offered to Maa Tara in the bhoga that is offered in the afternoon. Even an ordinary individual can also go there and they can ask the temple committee that in their name, a certain bhoga of fish or anything else can be offered to Maa Tara. Is that Vamachara? Yes, it's an offering of fish. But is that Vamachara Tantra? No, that is not Tantra. That is just Bhakti Marg offering to Maa Tara that can be done by any individual. So the point that comes, that I mean here is that if you have no mental restrictions, if the individual has no mental restrictions towards Vamachara, number two, if the second thing is that if the Upasaka, if the deity is open to Vamachara offerings, then one can offer whatever is the best so far as food is concerned, or whatever is that you consume, that you say a very important guest comes to your house. What is it that you offer to the guest? So those things you can offer to the deity. There is no problem. But provided the deity takes those kind of offerings, say when you're doing Maa Tara Upasana or Durga Upasana, Kamakhya Upasana, Bhairava Upasana, definitely you can do. In fact, all the deities we worship are more or less somehow linked to Vamachara. On the other hand, it is not at all compulsory to do so. So if you have reservations in your mind, then go for the simplest straight, the things that you can do. Say whether you can offer some sweets, even a whole fruit, that is perfectly all right. It is not that the deity gets angry with you or judges you one way or the other. Your mind should be in tune with it. If your mind is not in tune, then you offer what you think is the best for the deity. It's perfectly all right. He or she is going to take it with the devotion with which you have made the offering.
Sure. Should we continue with one more question, and then you can provide closing thoughts?
Okay, then this is the last question, then we wrap up. I think we've already done 1.5 hours.
Sure, sure.
And the questions will never end. So,
Yeah. So this question is regarding Kavachams. So if
okay.
Bhairava is considered as the Ishta, practicing the Kavacha Shostra of Bhairava is understood by default. But if the Ishta Devata is different deity, will practicing Bhairava Kavacham still help, or we do need to practice the particular deity's own Kavacham? Since the fundamental trait of Bhairava itself covers aspects of protection, security, etc., is practicing the Kavacham of Bhairava valid for all Upasana, all deities?
Bhairava Kavach can be done by anybody who is doing any Bhairava Japa. Anybody who is doing Om Bhairava Japa can easily do Bhairava Kavach, no problem with that, even if Ishta Devata is somebody else. So Kavacham, so when you do a deity upasana, there are 5 things that comes into play eventually. First is the mantra of the devata. Second is the stuti of the devata. Third is the kavacham of the devata. Fourth is the shastranamam of the devata. And the last is the hridayam of the devata. Hridayam is not to be touched. But among these 4, eventually, it's not on day 1. So few years of mantra you do, then you start with the stuti along with the mantra. Along with the stuti and the mantra, you do kavacham. Along with the stuti, mantra, kavacham, you do the shastranamam. This makes a complete package. Each one has its own role. Kavacham is directly aimed at protecting the individual, whereas the mantra is aimed at your spiritual growth. So, as and when required, Bhairava will bring about your spiritual growth. It may or may not always be constantly protective of the individual in the sense that you think. You may want, I want XYZ protection. Bhairava may think that no, I need to take this individual to a higher realm. So let him or her pass through a little bit of difficult time, and after that, he will be in a much more spiritual state. That is Bhairava's thinking, that is the deity's thinking. That is how the mantra works. Unless the mantra specifically has protective elements inside. For example, the Vatuka Mula mantra has the phrase Apadudharaka that automatically encodes a kind of protection from difficult situations. So additionally, doing a kavach is very good for the deity. There is no doubt about it. And Bhairava Kavach works with all Devis, Devi Sadhanas, or any deity in the Shaiva realm, Shiva Shakti realm. If you're worshipping, you can do Bhairava Kavach. It's very good to do. And I've seen literally miraculous things that have happened for people who have done significant amount of Bhairava Kavach, especially if there are very difficult times suddenly coming up. I know cases like this where people had to, some kind of a problem related to spirits and all that had happened, and various things were tried, nothing was working. In desperation, the individual started doing Bhairava Kavacham almost 54 or 60 times every day. And within a span of 14, 15 days, there was absolute miraculous transformation in the situation. And after that, thank God, never any negative was faced by, the individual or the victim who was facing that problem. Bhairava Kavacham is like nuclear if you do it properly. Okay, I think that kind of wraps up all the questions. So we'll end the webinar. This is the first one we did. I hope we are able to do more eventually, and we will also use these opportunities to update people who are connected to Kamakhya Bhairava Upasaka Foundation of the things that we are doing and the sadhanas that we do, the sevas we do, and the future aims that we have, which at this moment is the establishment of certain Bhairava temples in a certain configuration in different places in India, in which for which we need both help in terms of the sadhanas that you do. All the sadhanas that are done collectively, the sevas we do, are finally somehow aimed in order to manifest and make this thing real. Because it's not so easy to make a temple that has a strong impact. You have to first build that urja, that energy through sadhana. Of course, there are material aspects to it, like there's somebody to construct, somebody who's an architect, the land, most importantly, the money, everything is there. But that come into play after the spiritual component is done. And that is precisely why we encourage people to do these Vishesh sadhanas. We do so much sevas to the different deities in every month. So I hope this webinar was beneficial to the people. And I hope that we can do more webinars in coming times. Thank you, everybody. Jai Maa Kamakhya, Jai Bhairava, Jai Maa Tara.